Towards the back half of the 2000s, two different developers came together to make a game. Well, two companies and a publisher of typically nefarious intent. For these developers, we have a couple respected names for the time. On one hand, we have a smaller team whose plucky little shooter found itself well overperforming and becoming a bright spot in gaming as a whole. And on the other hand, we have an independent super developer who at this point were the propagators of unrelenting quality. What we received from this pairing is a game with a combat loop that syringes serotonin right into my aorta, and it has the Toonami guy as our player character. Come take a listen. This is that game. Roll the intro. Alright guys, context. At the time of writing this video, a great big winter storm has just swept through the North American Southeast, and since I live somewhere in the middle of SEC country, I had to be diligent. I scurried over to the local Walmart and stocked up on SpaghettiOs and Mountain Dew, so I knew I'd be set and would have minimal reason to leave my dwelling considering the oncoming barrage of skyborne bedlam that was about to hit my city streets. It would be one thing if folks around here could drive. They can't! But we don't even have salt trucks down here, so anything above a half inch of snow with any potential possibility of freezing and sticking around for a while inspires a straight fistful of cataclysm for the denizens here. Following my rendezvous on January 10th, 2025, I played the entirety of Bulletstorm, full clip edition, and began the first steps of making this video. By the way, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, the remaster is pretty. Touches up the texture, accents some colors, and improves the lighting. It does a bunch without overstepping its bounds. On the performance side, however, I did notice some frame rate fluctuations. It never knocked me out of the experience, but it happened enough that it was worth noting. There is also a particular bug that I came across in this playthrough that I will discuss when I get there, and that particular bug is somewhat egregious. With all of that said, before we can even begin discussing the sadism simulator that is Bulletstorm, we have some ground to cover. In the red corner, we have People Can Fly, and People Can Fly did something very special during the early to mid 2000s. With their original work unleashed upon the world in 2004, my experience with their work first came in the form of a demo disc. Who remembers demo discs? Coming from this particular magazine, the disc had different features depending on if you stuck it in a 360 or an Xbox OG, and for the Xbox original, we had playable demos for Half-Life 2, Stubbs the Zombie, Winning 11-9, and Painkiller! Hell Wars. I cannot tell you all how many days I spent absolutely rampaging through this leper village with my stake gun and my super shotty on this demo disc. 3 levels were included in this demo disc, if my memory serves correct. Town, prison, and Enclave? I'm having a hard time recalling this and Google isn't giving me much to work with here, but for what it's worth, I am for damn sure town and prison were there. And who needs fancy names for your levels anyway? These level names put a bonus on brevity. Less is more and none is best. As a simple man who likes simple things, the simplicity of Painkiller stole my heart, and its sequel expansion, Battle Out of Hell, was also equally as gnarly. The games weren't fantastically complex. They didn't need to be. They knew what they were, and that is something to commend. People Can Fly were laser focused on delivering rock solid gameplay first, and everything else came second. When I finally got my hands on the full game, the 04 original, I realized that the plot wasn't really all that to write home about. This will be a recurring theme, by the way. But I didn't buy this Polish punishment simulator to sympathize with some guy who started gazing lovingly at his wife at the wrong time only to get ate by Optimus Prime. I am here to slay demons! I'm going to stop myself here for the purpose of preserving a potential Painkiller series down the road. As a man who loved the original games and mourns what the series has become, that will be a ride worth taking when the time comes. But we have another developer to talk about. In the blue corner, we have Epic Games, the progenitors of Unreal and its engine of limitless horsepower. Now, while many may take umbrage with Epic Games in the present day, what with them nuking the Unreal franchise off of digital storefronts without so much as a warning tweet, having an inferior launcher with a host of issues, and them pushing all their chips into the middle of the table with the painfully mediocre first world money printer Fortnite. Thankfully for this story though, Epic hadn't become that company yet. Far from it. You see, Cliffy B was still here, and Cliffy B loved you. The story of Epic Games is one that I'm fairly certain most people know. As Epic Mega Games, they tilted the gaming sphere on its axis when they released Unreal, melting minds and graphics cards alike with something that pushed the bar so far in the future that the glare would sizzle the retinas of most pretenders. They then changed their names to simply Epic Games and proceeded to ride the tide that was Unreal's popular multiplayer, releasing the more PvP-based Unreal 99, Unreal Tournament 03, and the kingship that was Unreal Tournament 04. Come the early mid-2000s, Epic went to work with Microsoft with intention of making an exclusive for the Xbox platform, a game that eventually hit Windows, and the development of that port has an interesting wrinkle that ties this all together. Just stay with me. What they made was the cover-based ancestor of obsessive weapon reloading mechanics, where you played as a human being that weighed as much as a Toyota Corolla, approximately. Gears of War. Gears of War, upon its release, became an incredible success, taking a seat with Halo as one of Microsoft's few exclusive franchises. Forza is also here, but I don't play Forza. Upon its release, it helped the Xbox 360 in a big way, melting proprietary hardware be damned. And as I'm sure you all know, the Gears of War franchise quickly became a household name here in gaming land. I can still close my eyes and remember the memes and hype that the phrase chainsaw bayonet cerebrally bore. Simpler times. So here in our red square and blue square, we have two companies who are in the midst of great success, albeit success relative to their individual statuses within the industry, but great success nonetheless. But wait, guys, we're missing one. You knew I wasn't going to forget the overseer of this endeavor. So behold, the publisher, the villain with the infinite checkbook. Now, thankfully, EA did not tank Bulletstorm in this case. The game that was released was still very fun. But with that said, if I were People Can Fly at this time, I would not have been over the moon about taking critique from their ilk either. EA's reputation of a nihilistic Galactus was well established by this point, infamous for buying successful studios, meddling with that studio's secret formula, and then shutting that studio down when EA's ideas in that studio resulted in poor commercial performance. Seeing that logo peek across the horizon, flanked by bankruptcy in its many chapters, was never good. Granted, by this point, EA hadn't yet won the Consumerist Award for Worst Company in America the 2 consecutive years that they won it, but they weren't the harbinger of milkshakes and honey either. And yes, I've read that the legitimacy of that poll has been questioned due to the fact that there were other companies doing their Gilded Age best to piss off consumers with often more nefarious results at the time. That, and there were concerns about the mechanics of the poll that make people wary of the vote, but one simply has difficulty arguing that the optics are not the optics. A bad look is a bad look. Yeah, it's in the game, and you bastards hid half the game behind another microtransaction. Now, back to People Can Fly. Somewhere around the year 07, People Can Fly were trying to work up a demo, but they were having trouble extending their existing engine to suit whatever the demo would be. The company then considered potentially going a third-party route for a game engine. Enter Epic Games. People Can Fly worked up a demo of sorts with Unreal Engine 3, and they showed it to Epic Games. And Epic Games, being impressed and also having a checkbook worth possessing envy of, they hired Humans May Levitate to create additional content for the PC port of Gears of War. After being impressed with their quality, they decided to give Homo Sapiens Might Float the opportunity to complete the process of porting Gears of War to PC. Afterwards, Epic Games whipped out their crowbar and took it to their piggy bank and then bought our lovely little Polish studio. And here, my friends, is where the embryo of Bulletstorm resides. Clifford the Blazinski let it be known that the nihilistic Galactus would be publishing a game that the newly acquired People Can Fly would would develop once said nihilistic Galactus got done picking the remains of Pandemic Studios out of its teeth. What followed is what I could only consider to be a somewhat frustrating development cycle. So from what I've read in multiple different articles, the cycle went something like this. People Can Fly would develop some, and then Epic and EA would both offer their individual critiques. Eventually, because this all got very messy, it was decided to let EA send their specific critique to Epic, and then Epic would then mix that critique with its own and send it to PCF. As a hopelessly optimistic person, I'd like to think that Epic decided to be based and pelt EA's ideas into the sun as fast as they got them, but that's probably not what happened. So we ended up with basically PCF doing the work and Epic essentially acting as a sort of quality assurance for the most part. Hey buddy, where did you find the measurement for this whole—
I eyeballed it!
Something I haven't mentioned yet that I feel is worth mentioning now is the fact that this was PCF's first AAA game. Even though Painkiller was thoroughly fantastic, it was definitely not AAA. Hell, I'm not even sure if it was AA. So Epic Games was basically here holding their hands, helping them navigate a neighborhood with a higher budget, complete with the metaphorical HOA and everything. As the game began taking form, Bulletstorm's more noteworthy elements began rising to the surface. The weapons became more absurd, and over time, the various ideas that became certified points of advertising for this game became reality. The most important of which being
The leash.
this thing is god tier. Have you ever been playing a game and saw some obtuse homie way over yonder and thought my life would be easier if instead of being over yonder, he was over hither? Not anymore. Have you ever seen a strangely throwable explosive object and thought, wow, that would look excellent in this enemy's nasal cavity. If only I could make it happen. Not anymore. Have you ever thought, wow, it would be really cool if I sent this guy that's only somewhat adjacent to me on a trip off this nearby sheer drop cliff face and let him become an example in the concrete description for a high velocity impact spatter? Not anymore! Look, the kick in this game was already cool enough, but between this and the game's kick, the level of creativity you can have with dispatching your foes is wonderful. It also doesn't hurt that the weapons are in no uncertain terms stupid good. More on that when the time comes. Slaying these brutally unfortunate beings and having words fill up the screen is the dream that Brainrot is made of. Each unique kill has its own unique name based on a number of variables, including where the enemy was struck and which weapon was fired. I haven't unlocked all of these, as it can get fairly detailed. Look at this screen. It's all fairly wondrous. Seeing the screen fill up with schizobabble after enforcing my will in a room scratches that itch in my brain that only Chinese food and death metal can scratch. Something else worth noting is that this game ended up receiving a little bit of controversy from the pearl-clutching media here on this side of the pond for being, among other things, obtusely raunchy. Granted, even though some of the lines don't exactly land.
Third bounty hunter this week. Toronto is stroking one hell of a murder boner, man.
A lot of other lines do.
Hold your dick for 1 second, you fungal rim job.
While reading an interview with one of the guys from People Can Fly, the guy in question noted that his theory about the heat the game got for its dialogue came from the fact that the game's use of profanity was fairly creative, which makes some sort of sense. Calling someone an asshole is something we've all heard 100 times, but you call them a nerd's yellow polka dot Blaster McGee sandwich, and suddenly we have problems. In the game, you play as Grayson Hunt, the Pirate Bay's greatest employee. Nah, dude, I'm serious. He's literally a pirate. Look at him hydrate. He is also a person who has everything bad happen to him all of the time. You will see this as I break down the campaign. Space Pirate Grayson Hunt is voiced by Steve Blum, an inalienable part of our childhoods. If you were not fiendishly trying to stay awake longer than your parents on a Saturday night to watch Toonami back in the day, then I honestly do not know what you were doing. Edward Ulrich's trying to get his brother's body back, and you're not taking him serious. This man is a beacon of unmitigated culture. The story follows Grayson Hunt as he is on a quest against his old boss, named General Serrano, like the pepper, for some proper vengeance. And the story kicks off after him and his homie Ishii crash land on some planet that Carnival of cruise ship fame has retrofitted for resort purposes, and honestly, exactly how this company made the jump from Seabass bound vessels to interstellar hard-knuckle capitalism is beyond me. I have many questions and no answers. Jesus Christ, guys, I'm kidding. Carnival isn't even in the game. Put your lawyers away. I have but few dollars and even fewer patience. Now, before we continue, I will warn you that spoilers are indeed ahead. If you do not want spoilers for this game, then by all means, feel free to leave the video and then maybe come back after you play the game. But if you're down for what's about to show up, then by all means, put your seatbelts on, grab a burger, and let's have at it. After being hit with some disclaimers at the menu because my game that I bought that's rated M for mature as per the MSRP may just be edgy, gee, who'da thunk it? Our story starts here on the SS Syphilitic Insanity, where our player character and one of his homies are tormenting some poor feller while doing their pirate hydration. The guy they're interrogating tells Grayson and his homie that they've got a $500 million per head bounty as per the in-game Confederacy, before then getting himself booted out of the airlock. Apparently that guy was not only a bounty hunter, but the third one this week. While fidgeting with this door, we find out our bounty hunter has shadow play activated, and he blows a hole in the ship whilst frozen within the vacuum of space. After negotiating with the same door, our ship does some FTL skullduggery, and after we make it to the bridge, we see the Ulysses. The Ulysses is a ship that apparently the Confederacy care about, and also this Serrano guy that we keep hearing about is thought to be on board. So now it is time for shenanigans. Grayson, in a hydrated stupor, the best stupor, halfway rallies the troops and halfway puts them in a situation that there is no diplomatic solution for, at which point our main characters start opening fire. What follows is a mini game where nothing was ever going to end well, at which point our little ship gets blown all the way up. Ishii, he'll be important, just wait. Ishii gets blazoinked after taking away Grayson's steering wheel because apparently DUH laws still apply in deep space. We get a QTE of Grayson pushing some lever forward, not as rock and roll as the child abandonment simulator from God of War, but it gets the point across. At which point our ship does its Nissan Altima best and flies straight through the Ulysses as if it were a clapped out shitbox driving through a Family Dollar, before then hitting this planet's surface so hard that it throws our homies back in time a few years to the set of Star Wars The Phantom Menace, where our squad is walking inconspicuously down the side of a building with the aid of some gravity boots. These homies must have the world's strongest core to be able to do this. Then we repel through a window and help this one office guy named Novak clear his head. Afterwards, our homie Ishii decides to check this guy's Yahoo email instead of rigging the computer to go, and realizes they've been slaying innocent people this whole time as opposed to being a righteous hit squad against high-value targets. As the French would say, oof. They call General Serrano, and General Serrano tells them the truth.
You namby-pamby are Confederate sanctioned assassins.
And then Grayson opens fire on a hologram. Immediately following this, we find the one thing worse than finding out your career trajectory has been a lie this whole time.
A child.
We get control of the situation as some dudes storm into this room, and we get to turn their insides into outsides. We receive the first taste of this game's combat mechanics as our kick makes dudes float in unfortunate stasis. Sweet. Then Grayson takes a bullet for a wounded Ishii, as apparently the only thing Ishii does is get himself hurt. Then we blast back to the present, where we have plot armored ourselves away from dying in a ship crash, and Ishii is still hurt in the present. This Haas hoofs an actively bleeding Ishii to an elevator that still works because I guess Toyota got into shipbuilding in the distant future. We get sent on a fetch quest to grab some fusion cells because plot, and then some Black Friday shoppers burst through the door, and then some more Black Friday shoppers burst through this other door. We run through this area learning about the different movement mechanics shortly before the Ulysses comes in, flying low. Grayson and his homie stumble upon one of the crew from the Ulysses, a member of the final Echo Squad. That'll be important in a little bit. And they find him just as he becomes another victim of the Toyota-thon. Then we get our hands on his leash. It is considered an instinct moderated weapon, which I'm sure is just lawyer jabber for the coolest weapon design in gaming since, off the top of my head, the mine layer in UTO4. But it's more than just a weapon. It is an almost constantly available utility. The greatest thing since braised pork. It can fix any financial shortcoming as well as most marriages. Look at it! With Fusion Cell in tow, we battle our way back to our ship, yoinking all these denizens into the surrounding conveniently exposed rebar. We arrive to the ship in the nick of time, just as our medic gets to doing his work, and then...
Doc!
In the room! Get up!
Oh, that's unfortunate. And then the ship blows up again. As we awaken to seeing a couple folks referencing the opening from Fallout 1, one of our homies offers martyrdom to get us out of this jam, and I know for a fact that everyone who is still somehow arbitrarily alive is really getting sick of getting themselves shaboing-boinged. Then we get our neat wrinkle in the story. Ishii's repair, not only did it not get finished due to obvious reasons, but also Ishii's incomplete patch job must have included an Intel 14K series processor that is actively degrading. Ishii has a new robot eye that switches from red to blue. When blue, Ishii is Ishii. When red, Ishii is not Ishii. Simple enough, but it does keep the narrative elements at least a bit more interesting. Ishii informs us that his battery is running low and that he must get zapped back to full at some point in the next half hour or he will be rendered comatose to a permanent end. PCF were not lauded for their in-game narrative by this point, but this is a notable step up for them. One could guess that Epic had a lot to do with keeping the story a bit more interesting, or at least interesting until it's not. Then we find a Confederate drop kit. When you leash to this thing, you'll get a look at all your skill shots and more importantly, the ability to select different weapons and upgrade them, and buy ammo for them. This shooter came out during that period of time where developers were afraid of letting players carry more than 2 weapons at a time. The fact that this game gives you 3 weapons to carry around, I'm sure took a schmedium act of Congress to make happen. And while we're on this topic, this game doesn't have a health bar either. These were dark times in first-person shooter land. At least Gears of War had a little picture for you to look at to judge your likelihood of an imminent promotion to a pine box. The screen just going red followed by death an indeterminate amount of time later is just something that I personally have never liked. Rant aside, we now get the words on the screen! My brain has never been more happily smooth. We get some time getting comfortable in our brand new combat loop before then ending up in a hangar. In this hangar, it is decided to blow up all of their wobblecraft that they have strapped to the ceiling. Before an active wobblecraft comes in the hangar and we find out that the active reload mechanic from Gears of War has a degenerate younger cousin. I'm not going to call them aircraft. There is nothing airworthy about these things. We run outside to this really pretty area, closing in on the electricity source that we need for Ishii's ailing condition, and the lighting improvements in the remaster are really coming on strong. Ishii finds a stream of uncaged electricity. Now he's fully charged. And now it's time to dip as the situation has devolved quickly and this whole encampment is about to do its best Tannerite impression. Right as we were about to board this cargo train to hit the toll road to a better life, we get this big hombre stumbling forth with a minigun and I have to use the charge on my weapon. I haven't explained what a charge is. Here it goes. The charge is something you can buy from a dropkick. You pay to unlock the charge individually and then can buy more rounds for that particular weapon's charge. The charge function acts essentially as an alt fire, and they're all different degrees of Kinder's approved. While our starting weapon, the machine gun, is rather typical, the charge for it is a ramped up incinerator blast that strips the flesh from the bones of smaller guys and absolutely claps these big trend out monoliths of Walmart rotisserie chicken. Jibs, this big grind wheel gets broken loose just in time for a rail section. Okay, it's not completely a rail section, but it's close enough. It's about as fun as a section with an abnormally low ceiling can be. And also, the physics on this wheel for it to not immediately fall over are questionable at best. The malicious circle blows out the bridge ahead so that we can get our video game mandated train crash.
Brakes are out, you hear me? Wish like hell I didn't.
After shaking off said train crash, we QTE shimmy to the ground below and pretty shortly after pick up my favorite weapon in the game, the Screamer. The inhumane consummation of the Halo 1 Magnum and the flare gun from Blood. Its primary fire is good enough, but then you fire this weapon's charge, a flare shot, and every poor bastard in the area's skin starts bubbling to liquid, and suddenly I feel my bad feelings turn into good feelings.
It's a nightmare.
We end up in this cave and have to blast through these eggs. Yeah, this can't end poorly at all. Then we get a timer over our heads and we have to dip. After finding an unmanned wobblecraft that neither the FAA or EASA would approve of, the Nest Mama starts blasting through the actual mountain. And then we crash. We are maybe 3 levels into this game, and it is infinitely apparent to me that no one in this game can drive a damn thing. Ishii throws a Starscream-esque bitch fit, and then our objective becomes clear. The last couple of missions, Grayson and Ishii have been after a member of the aforementioned Final Echo Squad. You know, the same crew that Toyotathon's latest victim was in. The hope is that we can get with said person and arrange an evac off of Carnival's most problematic endeavor. After telling this news bot what I think about the fact that all of America's mainstream news media outlets are owned by entertainment companies, I find the pirate water. After getting properly crunk, a mini boss turns up. Fun fact, being hydrated earns you more skill points per skill shot, so you are economically encouraged to turn up. Crunk ain't dead. We run through this building and some dudes with a new weapon show up. The flail gun. It shoots exploding flails that attach to either enemies or the environment and can be exploded on command. It's a fine weapon. Its charge superheats said flail, allowing it to cut through enemies before exploding. Brutal. If an enemy manages to stick you with a flail, you had the privilege of trying to run forward said enemy before you explode, as if you were an elite in Halo that has been stuck with a plasma, and about 38% of the time you'll live. After that minor inconvenience, we find the final Echo member that we've been looking for.
I will kill your dicks!
She was not happy to meet us. By this point in the game, I was completely wooed by the Screamer. I want its likeness engraved on my front door. To hell with the landlord. Afterwards, we stumble flat-footed into this amusement park. We walk in and the automated ceiling voice is advertising a kaiju called the Mechaton, 1 letter off from God's most unfortunate Fallout 3 town. And then we get our hands on the Bone Duster, the game's resident shotgun. It makes sense that between People Can Fly and Epic that we would at least get a serviceable shotgun, especially considering the fact that the Unreal franchise has the flat cannon, i.e. my favorite game weapon of all time. There is a reason I sampled the flat cannon in my videos. It is cherished. The Bone Duster is a quad-barreled brisket burrito of unregulated cholesterol. The primary fire will send foes 10 feet into the great cold distance, and if they're still somehow living after their flight, their end has at least been orchestrated. And if it doesn't send them flying, it can and will cut them in half. The charge is an R-Type Delta-esque heat blast that is great for making sure you never lose a verbal disagreement again. Absolute W weapon. I would say this thing ate and left no crumbs, but I'm pretty sure it did not leave the plate either. Bone Dusters are carried by these girthy fellers. Darwin's missing link between the regular small guys and the hefty big guys. But they are no match for my obtuse firepower. This little amusement park setup is not prepared for a firefight, not even once. After cutting through this scale replica of insert city name here, a kaiju with non-OSHA approved wiring makes his presence known, so now it's escape time. We rummage through this tunnel before Mechaton the unmitigated Reptar returns, inspiring haste. And then we find one of our Black Friday shoppers holding a remote, and the Mechaton pauses. And then we get to drive the dinosaur! Driving the dinosaur! Woo! This section where we steer our new aluminum Raptor through the outside is a little clunky, and it slows down the pacing because of it. But on the other hand, Reptar, all my Rugrats homies stand up. We also can't forget that this thing was supposed to be part of an amusement park, but right now its laser eyes are cutting through my enemies like how the Kansas City Chiefs and their malignant ref ball cut through my 7-leg parlay every damn Sunday. How was this ride supposed to go, and how many lives were spent making sure that their quality was assured? After we stomp a mud hole in the entire neighborhood and walk it dry, our new friend Erlackers this gate and then dies an honorable power down. After we mourn the loss of our new friend, the gang decide to jump down this hole because no one in this crew has any sort of self-preservation instinct, clearly. Now, I'll say this here, you'll notice that I haven't been calling the starts and finishes of levels so far in this video, and I'll explain why. This game kinda sorta has levels. It has 7 acts and a bunch of chapters, and the movement from chapter to chapter and from act to act doesn't seem to have a whole bunch of fanfare. If you're quick, you may spot a loading screen sporting where we're at in the story, utilizing a man plus one additional half of a man quote technique that serves as the level's title. But for what it's worth, I only ever saw these splash screens if I was either reloading to a previous save or I had just died and needed a checkpoint. It is what it is. We make it outside and up an elevator and we run into new dudes. Dudes that are a tad quick, so you can't just leash them and kick them to your heart's content like the other group of dudes that we've been fighting. After hiding behind God's strongest picnic table, we find a sniper rifle. At first, I'm not keen to grab it because the game wants me to drop my screamer for it, but the rules are the rules and drop kits are drop kits. For what it's worth though, this sniper is banging. Called the Headhunter, when zoomed in, you can steer the bullet to make sure you don't miss. It really takes a skill out of it, man. I'd hate to see this thing in a COD lobby. The charge for it, however, allows you to steer the body of the guy that you just lanced and then detonate his body. It's fantastic. After telling this news bot what I think of news media repeatedly pulling the money printing ad lever anytime something tragic occurs, we find our way to another sniping section that once again demands that I temporarily relinquish my screamer, and this is not cool. After this is done though, I gain access to the thumper. So apparently our leash has a charge too now, right? What's next? Grayson's brutal sideburns getting a charge too? Huh? This charge basically slaps the ground and sends adjacent fellers airborne and prone. Great for when you decide to use a flare to send some feller off to Triton or whatever equivalent exists in this godforsaken solar system. As we close in on the lady from Final Echo, we get a close-up of a dude wearing someone else's face on his face. Then we fight our way into this hot-ass room where the lady that we've been looking for is found. At this point, the OST goes off. I haven't spoken much about the OST to this point, but it does have its moments where fire starts spewing out of my headset, forcing me to go to the local urgent care to get treated for burns. Guys, my ears look like the topographical map of the Swiss Alps at this point. I can hear both companies' influence on the music. It's pretty neat. After she finishes skewering this one guy from ear to eye, you know, one of these days I'm going to run out of Cannibal Corpse songs to reference, but today is not that day. We have another meeting with the Final Echo lady. She's still not happy to see us. After having to throw an AIO on Ishii's degrading intel chip, it is off to the next fight. Trishka, the Final Echo lady, we all learned her name just now. Well, Trishka gives us the sociological rundown of the area. On one hand, we have skulls, our Black Friday shoppers, and on the other hand, we have creeps, the quick fellas that like wearing faces on their faces. The creeps are of some non-human origin, and since there is no food in the area, the skulls regularly stuff them in their air fryer on a regular basis. Obviously, the creeps don't like that much, which explains some of the articulate displays of gore that we sometimes run across. Now, as a three-man crew, we find a bunch of skulls and creeps infighting outside, doing their best Doom impression. Unfortunately for all of them, though, my campaign progression has mandated that this thoroughfare requires my thorough footsteps. After remembering that I hate motion blur and jamming it into an incinerator, we make it all the way to this hydroelectric fancy dam and immediately start violating the protocols. Yeah, this can't end poorly at all, guys. Great plan. This section through here with my bone duster just feels so good. I am an anthropomorphic war crime and my fingers have no prints.
They will not find me.
Why do you think Grayson uses fingerless gloves while sliding down cables at mock misdemeanor? After making another daring escape because everywhere Grayson Hunt goes, insurance claims follow, and drying ourselves off, we try commencing to a quiet navigation.
You see any way across?
Yeah, I think I do.
We get jumped in these city streets. We are also shown these new pods that we can throw around. I didn't use them very much, but whatever, it's time to hit this toppled building. After reminding this news bot of how everyone felt when Robinhood started restricting the purchase of stocks during the GameStop short squeeze of 2021, we find an open street and then almost get ate up by a plant. Hey look, it's another environmental hazard. Well, how is this a vacation spot? We then promptly find a burning building. What is causing the burning of the building is that an escape pod pod is lodged in the top of that building, and the thought is that hopefully General Serrano is in that escape pod. The idea is that the gang can hopefully get with General Serrano, use him to help get off the planet, and then at the first possible convenience, put that pepper on the cutting board. But then Trishka decides to make like a Frito and dip, causing Ishii's busted CPU to flash its violence BIOS.
If you are not going to cooperate, I have no reason to allow you to live.
Dog, why did they not have any Ryzen chips on the ship? A Ryzen 5 1600 would have gotten him in better shape than he's in right now. Look at him. After failing a pop quiz in the middle of my first-person shooter experience,
You're a grade A douchebag.
we Rube Goldberg our way through this gate and then promptly set everyone on fire. And then we fight a new kind of mini-boss. He's basically the same idea as the mini-bosses that we've had to this point, but this one's fully armored. Shoot his backpack and he becomes equally edible. And then he drops a new weapon, the Bouncer. The Bouncer basically functions as the game's grenade launcher or 8-ball launcher if you hate new things. It fires exploding balls that bounce. If fired normally, they will simply explode on impact. If you hold the trigger, the ball won't explode until you let off the trigger. When charged, the ball creates an explosion every time it touches a surface, which seems to result in it just awkwardly bouncing in one place for a while. It's alright, it might be my least favorite weapon in the game, but if this thing is your game's worst weapon, then I'd argue that you have a fine arsenal. We stumble into this area and get blasted by some aerosolized PCP before our two friends become spontaneously violent.
Servo Confederate bitch! What's the matter with you two?
It's explained away in an info dump, whatever. Apparently though, this green fog can be used to aid our campaign of violence against the locals. Ishii decides to move ahead like a character in a horror movie that doesn't want to stay alive and immediately gets ate up by the local flora. No one has any self-preservation. I said it once, I'm saying it again. In a haste to find our problematic friend, we rampage through a equally problematic garden. We're gonna need some sphere vertical for this. Roundup just got punked out like a bitch. Thankfully, the myriad of man-eating plants and titanic cacti is really doing a lot to help me make my bullets last. I almost missed the plants using their tongues to bring down this aircraft, which I really think has to be the pilot's fault. He was flying way too low. Every time I refill my charges on my screamer, I just run right through them all again. This thing is unbalanced. Oh, and now we have a boss fight. It is a hyper-mutated fly trap. That's a mouthful. I'm just gonna call him Jim Bob. The idea here is that you want to wail on him until Jim Bob gets really mad and decides to try and give you a crazy sinus infection. At which point you have to run around and blow up these red spots on his side. This guy is a bit spongy and the ammo left around the map is somewhat insufficient, but if you know what you're doing, it shouldn't be much of a problem. With that said, I did not know what I was doing and it took me a couple tries to get through here. After successfully blowing up all of Jim Bob's red spots, he'll do that thing that irregularly shaped bosses do where they get really angry and hang upside down for a bit. And also worms start coming out of his sides. Just wail on him some more and then he'll hit the dirt like a mighty oak. After that, a Jim Bob will try to regenerate. Blow up the worms coming from his sides or tentacles, whatever they are, I don't know. And then after all those are gone, he'll jump back up on the ceiling again, at which point his neck becomes arbitrarily the weak point. So we bisect him and the vegetation finally explodes. If that all sounds like a drag, it's because it is. I think the fight overstays its welcome a tad. As Jim Bob lies defeated all over the everywhere of this arena, we go and find Ishii, and when we spot him, he's taking an impromptu shower. I'm not going to say what happened to him. The context tells it well enough. After going outside, the gang hatch a plan, and since the gang have no idea or concept regarding the idea of structural soundness, they decide to run through a building that is laid over its side over a chasm. Yeah, great plan, guys. Just great stuff. Intel Man kicks a person-sized hole in the wall and we start diving through this sideways building. Now, I will say, horrible idea for a strategy aside, this laid over building has some of my favorite scenery in the game. A lot of the earlier bits of the game kind of blended together in my memory. You're either at some resort place or underground or at a resort place, and aside from some goofy bits here and there like this bar or the amusement park of dubious origin, I had a lot of trouble recalling a lot of the locations locations off the top of my head. However, this building and its compromised positioning sticks out to me like the whine of a modded Honda Civic with a laptop in the passenger seat. It's good stuff. After pulverizing some craniums with a runaway elevator, we make our way through this monolith of poor city planning. Juice time. Now, I'm really enjoying the unique combat encounters that this sideways building is providing us, especially with all the pitfalls everywhere, considering the fact that we are still over a chasm. Eventually, however, because this is still a video game, the building starts to shift as if it's gonna fall through. So now we have only one thing we can do: make like a beaver and inexplicably stop a flowing stream of water and then get the hell out of here. After using an elevator and some explosive FPS barrels, we literally fly into the next level or chapter or act, whatever. I don't know. No one's telling me these things. I've ran out of witty things to tell newsbots at this point, but make no mistake, I still punish it for the crime of existing. Oh, by the way, we find the monorail. We have to hold out for a little bit though until the monorail cart actually shows up. And then once it shows up, we have to hold out some more. Hey guys, Bungie called, they want their sacred icon back. We get some exposition about how there is worse on the planet than just skulls and creeps, and they're called burnouts. And oh, hey, look, there's one. Oh, there's a couple. And since this is still a video game, you know, I'm certain with all the crashes and explosions, Grayson's gonna have the CTE demon jabbering felony blather into his cerebral cortex before too long. So burnouts are these guys with orange glowing bits, and they are actively being heralded as some headcrab level ulterior threat. Those same orange bits are allegedly supposed to be a weak spot, but my flail gun and flares don't need that precision. They will explode just like anything else. Burnouts, aside from sharing a name with my favorite racing franchise of all time, they are all about the Zerg Rush, Google front page style, but they go down as easy as anything else. They bring down this aircraft, which once again seems like the pilot's fault. Whatever governing body is handing out licenses here needs to be audited, but then a big burnout, which I'm just gonna call a burnt up, shows up, and we have to kick him into the blades of this downed aircraft. Here in this post-apocalyptic vacay spot where all the elevators work for some reason, we find out that we're way closer to Serrano's pod than we were before. And then Trishka falls down a hole and Ishii's intel side gets all sardonic.
We do not need her anymore.
After Grayson makes an Avengers landing, we get a storyline wrinkle. It's during this cutscene that I must say, I notice here that all of the characters look like they've got a dip in and their faces are Botox levels of stiff. I know I didn't come here for the plot, but there's a weird disconnect between the words being said and the blocking. All the characters just look like they're reciting lines in exchange for Lexapro to varying degrees, but at least the voice acting is solid. Trishka gets ill with Grayson because she overheard Ishii and his prior discussion before said Avengers landing. As she continues getting irate with Grayson, Grayson starts spilling the tea on Captain Chili Pepper's misdeeds and what with orchestrating the schmurder of reporters, witnesses, and the like. And but we have a twist! Apparently Novak is Trishka's dad.
Yeah, at least one I know of. Guy named Novak.
Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. Grayson's rupture of his can of beans has left Trishka inquisitive. For context though, because I missed this at the time of my playthrough, Trishka doesn't know who exactly unplugged her dad. She just knows who made the call to unplug her dad. Details, guys. After falling down a solid distance and then walking off a concussion, yeah, the CTE demon's calling, we walk into this open area where a burnt up dies a remarkable death. And after hydrating real quick, we're back to business as typical. For whatever shortcomings the story has, the combat loop has me scratching my epidermis into nothingness. It really is just that good. At no point do you feel like you're anything less than obscenely powerful. We see this monolithic beast making wet bread of the infrastructure as burnout takedowns continue to do their crackling best. One of them hurls a Goodyear at my mandible. Lame. Dog, make it a Michelin. I'm a man of quality. Seeing everything go belly up in this city is really quite well done. So this is a hecaton, and this hecaton is implied to be the mama of the nest that we face-fisted a few hours ago. This crew of ours is a walking detriment to any developed nation's GDP. I know a thriving economy hates to see these guys coming. Why do all the elevators work? I feel like with how everything has thoroughly gone downhill on this planet, these elevators are almost a plot hole. For some reason, I get the feeling that these skulls can't keep up with their 10mm sockets based on how slipshod their wobblecraft tend to be. And then we have another rail section. This one's about clearing the rooftop for old Admiral Jalapeno and then rabbit punching this hecaton with our minigun. We get a cutscene where the hecaton does its best EA impression and decides to treat Serrano's escape pod as if it were Bullfrog Productions. However, the escape pod was set to... After this is all tied up, Trishka seizes the opportunity to try and figure out what happened to her dad.
Did you kill my father?
Straight from the horse's mouth itself, causing Ishi to get defensive of Captain Pepper.
Put the gun down.
You're kidding me.
And then Captain Pepper himself has a revelation.
A DNA bomb.
The DNA bomb is designed to vaporize all living beings while keeping the remaining architecture intact. He then says his Diablo, Mass Effect, All of Duty, or whatever DNA is supposed to stand for, bomb, is going to explode in 2 hours, but however, his jump ship for getting off world isn't going to show up for 3 hours, which, according to my arithmetic, adds up to a story wrinkle. Yeah, go ahead, trust the guy that you've been trying to kill this whole time. That can't end poorly at all. He remembers the phone call, Grayson. After all this horsing around, Serrano then finally turns around to answer Trishka's question. With the new task ahead of disabling this DNA bomb, and with General Serrano in tow, we take control again. Serrano has some of the more quotable lines in the game, as well as some of the more questionable lines in the game. His ratio of landing dialogue to celestial levels of vulgarity is somewhere around the level of Hangover 2. Don't ask me what formula I used to concoct that answer.
I made it the fuck up.
Serrano starts expo dumping about the reason why the city has so many tunnels. The sheer quantity of info dumping in this game can get tedious, and I feel like the game could have benefited narratively from a little bit of show don't tell, or at least tell after a sufficient amount of show. Apparently they had convicts working in the tunnels beneath, and those convicts went on strike and broke a bunch of stuff, causing the Duracell bunny to periodically go on a power trip in the sky. We head vertical and start cutting through this skyscraper while a gamma storm is happening. See, this is what I meant when I said the Duracell bunny was going on a death trip. Alls I know though is that if you kick dudes into the storm, you can see their skeleton. Seems only half as traumatic as a deep south downburst. This section is another section that really sticks out to me. The ambiance of this nightmarish hellstorm suits the amping pace of the story. After all this mayhem, we end up underground again, and I'm gonna be real, I'm getting pretty sick of these underground areas. Like, they're fine, but they're not Rajagar. We find this redstone minecart and behold this big underground prison where the aforementioned convicts were apparently working. And then, because nothing works right, we get dumped off into this crazy radiated Fukushima stream, and we have to sprint off while our onboard Geiger counter is going crazy. After simply shaking off some diabolical radiation sickness, we get a quick view of what looks like a gamma scorpion. They've got a different name, but just wait, they'll be important here in a minute. We get bum rushed by some burnout revenges, and then after making it up to this platform, Serrano gets jump scared off of it because he can't check corners, and now we have to find a workaround so that we're all following the same path again. We briefly get a cutscene where Ishi has fought back his tilted 14900K, and him and Grayson have a nice heart-to-heart.
No matter what happens, no matter what I say as I lose possession of my mind, know this. You are my brother. I followed you of free will, and I do not hold you accountable. We'll scalp that motherfucker.
That's sweet. I finally get rearm access to the last weapon the game has to give us. Dubbed the Penetrator, it essentially acts as the game's railgun. The charge shot is actually kind of interesting. It lets you fire your drill off once and then redirect said projectile once again into another guy, which is a little clunky, but hey, for effort. And I must say it is infinitely satisfying to stick some poor guy to the geometry and then watch them get rotated. We get Serrano back on track, and then we find another operational lift, a Deus Ex Machina. After getting on this lift, a bunch of those gamma scorpions, their real name is mutates, well, they start trying to snatch our e-brake. Lame. After opening fire at the sky for a bit, we have to get off the lift before it explodes. At this point, my serotonin receptors are becoming resistant to all these set pieces. I'm feeling my brain wrinkles level out and my eyes droop to levels once considered animalistic. We finally find the Ulysses as it's over here taking a dirt nap, and promptly, Admiral Jalapeno starts giving Grayson a hard time about how many of his crew from the ship simply didn't make it.
These are human beings you've killed, Gray. They had families, people counting on them. How much pain you reckon you just spread across the universe?
We fight our way through this blasted building before then beginning the process of trying to storm the ship. The ship has since been ransacked by a bunch of burnout paradises, and I've gotta say, getting Cyber Monday'd in these tight corridors is getting old. Eventually, we find our way to this area with a bunch of purple electricity everywhere. You gotta turn off something in the middle of the room to turn off the electricity, and then very quickly jump over these walls. It's cumbersome. We find an incinerated vertical in front of us, and my friends, he never stood the chance. Now we have reached the DNA bomb. Also, there's an escape pod here. Write that down. We carefully and precisely enter the password that is being fed to us by the Pepper Man from the adjoining room, with the result being we QTE our way into inadvertently activating the bomb.
Well, I got a flight to catch.
The villain has been lying to us the entire time. Gee, who would have thunk it? Now, I will say this game's story was never going to win any awards, but I'm starting to get the feeling that this game has Revenge of the Fallen syndrome. It's getting touch and go. It feels like we're making things up as we go along. In a panic to get away from this bomb that we have now inadvertently armed, we try to run away, going in this room and then through this tunnel, and then, oh, okay, we're back at the bomb again. And then Trishka shows back up.
I caught a power line. Now come on. This is falling apart.
Yeah, guys, the matrix of leadership isn't found, it is earned. You know what? While at this point, the game's combat is still fantastic, it will never not be fantastic. I'm really starting to be ready for this story to be completed. This, oh, we're super close to evac, but not close at the same time arc is getting not only old, it's getting geriatric. For God's sake, they've been looking for the One Piece for 1,200 episodes, and somehow that is still keeping people invested, but I'm 6 hours into this game, and I feel like pummeling my cranium with the nearest brick that I can find. Since this game is a generous game, we get one last decently sized romp through the resort environment with a now fully completed arsenal. This stretch here essentially acts almost like a penultimate level of sorts, where everything that made the game good to this point is really accentuated, and we are simply focused on the mayhem that this game is so fondly remembered for. After getting split up from the homies for a minute so I can go on my own solo tour of Savage Butchery, things come to a head in this small room where the game decides to throw everything at us. Not just the kitchen sink, it throws the kitchen, dog. I have no idea what chapter I'm on or where I'm at. I just know that we're close to the end. Call me a person in a hot car because I'm locked in. We finally spot the jump ship and then we get a timer. The ship is trying to dip without us and then we get blown up again. Then, with concussion in tow, we yoink down the ramp and steal a ride. We're immediately met by some new brand of target practice. They're called Heavy Echo Stormtroopers. They're tough, but they can eat a flare all the same. They can also become victims of explosive decompression. Trishka gets excited again and runs off to commit the murder of the man that we're also trying to murder, and then Ishii gets this door open for us. This particular room really sucks. I was stuck here for a minute. Anywho, we finally find Big Haas Habanero, and Trishka beat us to him. And then we get our cutscene where Big Haas Habanero tells Trishka that Grayson was the one to unplug her dad.
That puke dick, right there.
And then Grayson starts pantomiming. Apparently, Full Clip Edition has a bug, and Grayson's pivotal dialogue in this key scene here just doesn't work. So I went to YouTube and found a functioning cutscene.
You got every right to kill me.
I thought my brainstem was dividing itself by itself when this happened during my original capture of the game. Having a bug like this in one of your final cutscenes is worth putting someone in a knee bar over. I need all my loose ends tied up in this 7 out of 10 story, not just most of them. Anyway, here under the pressure, Serrano puts a leash on old Ishii and then gives Grayson the hand of God to his trachea. And then we get reincorporation.
I don't hold you accountable.
However, Ishii gets a random BIOS update in the middle of this climactic event, giving him the ability to fight back against Serrano's will, leading to reincorporation again.
You ain't worth any last words. Just a sad puddle of puke.
Right! Ishii!
After some more QTEs, we impale Serrano, and his bloodstains have a Hyundai Kia build quality. But speaking of Hyundai Kia build quality, Serrano ain't dead yet, and he climbs down off of his industrial stalagmite and yoinks an airlock, and we plummet back to the ground. You mean the story's not finished yet? Trishka and Grayson hatch another ridiculous scheme after their landing to go back onto the crashed Ulysses and use that one escape pod that we saw earlier and the blast from the DNA bomb to get out of the atmosphere. It's so ridiculous that it'll have to work because this game pisses all over physics and its principles at every possible opportunity. We get there quickly enough, and I cut this one dude in half that's trying to get in just in time to complete the game. The DNA bomb goes off and the planet gets wiped clean of life, and we're left here with just Trishka and Grayson chilling out in their escape pod. The game ends with a slight tease and zero resolution for anything that has happened. Just the understanding that Trishka doesn't hate Grayson anymore. And if you think that wasn't sequel bait enough, we get even more sequel bait in the post-credit sequence, where we get a black screen and some dialogue.
Hey there. How you feeling, Sushi Dick? You see God while you were gone?
God is dead.
So as far as the post-mortem for this game goes, I did have loads of fun with it. And I know I harped on the story a lot. I feel like it eventually became tedious. There was a lot of good ideas. It's just for whatever reason, a lot of the things they did to try and add little wrinkles and tension to the story, it didn't land for me. But that's subjective. And while I think part of that frustration may have been exacerbated by the fact that I played the entire game in one day, I feel like that particular criticism would still exist if I had broke up my playthrough over several days. The gameplay was fantastic, top-notch combat with some ideas that are outside but still pressed up against the box. And after the completion of the game, you unlock what is basically a new game plus called Overkill mode. Lets you start the game with all weapons and charges. And if you unlock all of these skill shots for a given weapon, you get unlimited ammo. It is simply a carnage factory. And then there's also a score attack mode named Echoes that I'm sure is fine, but I'll admit I haven't messed with it very much. I'm here for the campaign. While the game did enjoy some critical success on account of that excellent gameplay, commercially the game was a failure. It did not turn a profit. In that same interview that I referenced earlier with one of the developers from People Can Fly, he stated that part of why the game didn't turn a profit is because of the time it took to develop the game. He stated that if the game was done in a quicker time frame, say shaving 6 months to a year off of the development time, the game probably would have sucked. And you know what? I admire the integrity here. If you're going to do something, do it right. I just wish the conclusion was a bit more conclusive, what with hindsight being what it is. That same developer then went on to say that they weren't explicitly trying to sequel bait, they were just trying to give a more open-ended style of ending. Think that book, The Giver, but I still can't help but look at how the ending plays out and not think that they had big ideas for the franchise that they were hoping would follow. I mean, look at this.
Rill, Oliver, Ishii. They all died following my mission. They're on me.
So, what are you gonna do about it?
What else am I supposed to glean from that? Either way, it's an A+ game with an alright story and occasionally hilarious dialogue. I thoroughly enjoyed it. If you catch it on a Steam sale, it's worth it. All right, guys, this is coming straight off the dome here. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, I thank you and I appreciate you. This is the third one of these videos that I've made, and according to the law of averages, it takes 3 to make a pattern, so here we are. I've really enjoyed making these, and I've really enjoyed seeing other people enjoy what I've done. So until further notice, I'm going to keep doing it. So with that said, much love, everybody, and I hope to see y'all soon. Peace. On to the next thing.